Okay, so this last week I had modified my title slide a bit to go along with my title, Powder Keg, to show that the fuse actually does get shorter, and the Middle East really is a powder keg. This week I thought I would kind of build on something in the news for a title, and I'm going to call this Prophetic Mudslides. Now, my in-laws have lived in Southern California for a lot of years, and we spent a lot of time there with them. One of the prettiest areas is up around Santa Barbara, Montecito, there along the coast. And this is what happened to a guy who was driving his Prius the other night on a road in, whoops, I'm not sure why that, oh, there you go. He's got his wipers on, though, so at least he's being safe. Now, listen, that was a major tragedy. There are a couple dozen people dead or missing, and homes destroyed. Some of the most expensive real estate that we have in this country was destroyed. His car, by the way, that couple was okay that was in that car. But the pictures, and I'll talk about it in just a moment, are just tragic. But it's sort of like the world is on the verge of a giant prophetic mudslide. That's my point. So last week I said we were a powder keg, and this week we had another example that things can change very dramatically in a very short period of time. A lot of people in Santa Barbara, Montecito, couple dozen by most counts, went to sleep the other night, laid down in their bed, and they're dead. Things changed that quickly because it rained, and the rains came, and the hills, the water ran off the hills and then down the streets and just destroyed dozens of homes. Some very expensive homes. I grew up in Johnstown, went to high school in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, so I know a little bit about floods. And right after my parents moved away from there, they had a similar freak rainstorm that just washed down the hill. And some friends of ours said that 1 block from their house, a wall of water came down the street 25 feet high. And that's going to cause a lot of, because the water channels, and it's like there's no water, and then there's 25 feet of water. And that was from about an 8 or 10 inch rainstorm in a short period of time. And there's just no place for the water to go. And I think that's a good picture of what we're going to face as these end time events converge and things get closer and closer together. Things do seem to be accelerating. They seem to be happening more quickly. This is some pictures from California. This is the 101 freeway, which is one of the major coastal highway there around Santa Barbara that's just shut down. Here's a picture of a neighborhood. Here is on the right, there was a family of 4, like a 16-year-old boy, 14-year-old girl, a mother, and a father. They have not found the father and the son yet. The mother survived and was okay, and they had to pull the girl out, and they pulled her out alive in a pretty dramatic rescue. So killer mudslides in Southern California. Here's another picture of the 101. And I've driven this road many times, so it's not an unusual thing. But it happened quickly and suddenly, and really without warning. Although you can go look up some websites that have all the at-risk areas for flooding. And it just takes one freak rainstorm and lives are changed. And people enter into eternity. Somebody at church, I don't want to say who, but I think I know who it was, gave me a magazine. The magazine was actually called Teaching Tolerance. And this is a magazine that's published and sent to educators. You can sign up for free. And I spent a little time about this because they have videos on there. They have lesson plans for teaching grade school kids, young grade school kids, first, second grade, about transgenderism, LGBTQ issues. And they have teachers that are talking and how wonderful there is. And as to show you their orientation, they have a code of conduct as to how you're supposed to act. They get a lot of their information. SPLC on campus, this is a big ad in the magazine. SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, in poverty and law are it should be the Southern Promotion of Leftist Causes, I think is the better way you should say it. I just made that one up, by the way. And this is very troubling. And I watched some of these videos. I'm going to spare you the playing them. And I know people are lost, but I grew up around lost and unsaved people. I was one myself at one point. But people used to think rationally. And we talk about Romans chapter 1 and what it says, that a judgment of God is that people lose the ability to reason. And this is happening on a massive scale. These are educated people. These are people with master's degrees, PhDs, that are promoting this nonsense. Now, I do not have time to play you all the things that I listened to this week. And so I'm going to make some recommendations. One recommendation is, I believe it was on the Thursday or Friday podcast of Secure Freedom Radio. So just go to securefreedom.org, Secure Freedom Radio. Just Google that, or if you've decided not to follow Google anymore, go to, DuckDuckGo or Bing or one of the others, and go and listen to the show. I believe it is the last segment, and they were talking about the reinstitution, because of threat of litigation and current litigation going on, of bringing transgender people into the military. And they interviewed a 73-year-old man who has been through sex reassignment surgery, and he said, essentially, these people should not be in the military. One is that 40% of people that go through sex reassignment surgeries try to commit suicide. These are the people that the secular world and medical profession and now the educational establishment and everything try to foster and be helpful, and it doesn't work. And as Frank Gaffney noted, it's because like every cell of your body kind of knows you're male or female, and you're trying to go against that. And it's really against nature. And I do think that the Romans 1 judgment that we talk about a lot is in operation here. And so I don't do this when I talk about it I do think it's crazy, okay? And I'm not doing it to run the people down necessarily. I'm pointing out what's going on that is really the fulfillment of what I think is Bible prophecy. And so take it in that context. We all know that these people need the Lord. That is the only hope for anybody. But it is shocking to me what the lack of reason that I see everywhere on these and many other issues. I'm almost speechless, and I'm speechless. I mean, really. Yeah. So here's from the Teaching Tolerance, challenging gender stereotyping and homophobia in sports. And I was thinking about gender stereotyping, on linemen in NFL football or NCAA football. Those are probably always going to be males. That's a gender stereotype. I believe all big linemen, you know, those 6'7" people, they're even bigger than me, will, and that's saying something, by the way, that they will pretty much always be male. By the way, there's also some things that kind of contrary to evolution, they found out that about 20 years ago, the size of people is kind of leveled off. We're not getting the gains in height and everything that we got with better nutrition and that sort of thing. And the evolutionists are kind of like, well, this is kind of like not what we think should happen. You know, the species should continue to get better and better. But they still believe it. There are people like, you know, the 44th president who thinks that, well, we live on a different planet, is what he said this week. The people that are conservative. But look at this. This is a similar site, and this is what they're pushing. This is the official website that they're pushing up in Canada about teaching LGBTQ in grade schools and other schools. They have this: supporting diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and expressions. Goals for SOGI inclusive education. Look what this says: inclusive learning. Classroom materials and activities contain positive images and accurate information about sexual and or gender diversity. And they have all these things about it. And I agree there's gender diversity. There is male and female. SOGI history and culture, which reflects accomplishments and contributions of transgender and gender nonconforming people. Facilities. Individuals may choose to use washrooms and change rooms that match their gender identity, including non-gendered single-stall washrooms and change rooms. Now listen, this is from the official educational establishment in Canada. I believe this comes from British Columbia, and I think I saw something on here that this is what they're putting in schools in Langley, British Columbia, a suburb of Vancouver. I spoke at a conference there. Mike Clapham and I spoke at a conference there in early October. Beautiful, one of the most beautiful places, Vancouver, that you can go to on the planet. And the people in charge are losing their minds. I don't know how else to say that. It breaks my heart. Here's, like, for example, here's one of the magazines, a book by Michael Hall called Red, A Crayon Story, because you see the point of the story, and they have a video interview there with a little kid, and he says, you know, I read the book, and I get the point of the book, because it's a blue crayon, but he says he's red, or it says, or they say it's red. And so even the little kids are picking, and this is what is being done. The little kids are picking up on it, and this is what's being done to shape their minds. It is propaganda. And the establishment goes along with it. And you think with a guy like Baby Trudeau in charge that they're going to change there? No. This person also has this, one guy has this, a guide to gender, the Social Justice Advocate's Handbook, and he even has this thing he made up on his website called the Genderbread Person. It's pronounced metrosexual.com. And it goes through all of this. And I mean, who do you think is the target audience here? 63-year-old guys like me? It's little kids. Little kids. Folks, I don't know how you can leave your kids in public school. I mean, it's really to that point. And if you think this is going to stay in California or British Columbia, or I also saw on one of the websites, Alberta, Canada, province of Alberta, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So I only pointed out to emphasize the point that this Bible prophecy stuff is real. And it is a mudslide. Did you see any of this 2 years ago? And we had that decision of the Supreme Court 2.5 years ago. June 30th, June 28th of 2015, the United States Supreme Court approved same-sex marriage, mandated it. And that's supposed to make law, but they did. And now we have all these things. So, and this whole thing seems to be spinning out of control. There is, you should go look it up. His name is James Damone, I believe, D-A-M-O-N-E. He was a Google employee. He was an engineer at Google, and he wrote a memo about how Google is doing some really stupid gender things. And he was fired. His attorney, a very articulate lady, I don't remember her name, has filed a lawsuit against Google. I hope it's successful. It's 161 pages. You can probably find it. I'm sure it's out there and you can download it. And the screen captures of what's going on internally at Google about it's okay to punch a conservative. These are posted on Google message boards internally. And James Damone gives a very rational argument about some of the things that are going on that is wrong, and he is fired. But everybody, the people there, and we can't hire white males, we can't hire Asians, and this is Google. Now, I do not understand why, and I'm sure that there are lawsuits that are going to be coming that will treat Google as essentially a public utility. And I do not understand why, if somebody can force you to make a cake and call you discriminator for a viewpoint discriminator if you don't, I don't understand why that doesn't apply to Google. Because they are discriminating against people based on their religion. I don't care. I mean, it's a public accommodation. It's essentially a public utility. And I think you'll see some more lawsuits. And I'm very happy to see the lawsuit filed by Dennis Prager and PragerU against Google, and then this one coming out. I saw Twitter this week is they are nuking Twitter accounts of conservatives, just deleting them. Facebook is doing the same thing. So here's just a couple economic things. Bitcoin investors struggle to cash in on fortunes. I mean, people have a lot of value in Bitcoin yet. It's just, and it's being accepted more places. And we were talking about this in the office this week about what is blockchain and what is Bitcoin and how does it work, and what's backing the Bitcoin. And it's like, well, people think it's worth money. That's what's backing it. This is kind of interesting. This has huge geopolitical implications. Oil price has gone up to over $70 for the first time in 3 years. That'll help Saudi Arabia. Part of what you've seen going on with Saudi Arabia, I think, and its move towards Israel is partly economic, because they're weak. And in that culture, that religious culture, they make peace and they're accommodating when they're weak. It's the history of 1,400 years of that religion. Islam, in case somebody wants to report me. But it's what the Prophet Muhammad said to do when you're weak. So this has huge implications, and it's also going to mean that there's going to be a revival of the shale oil and gas in our country and other places worldwide as the price goes up. And they've improved techniques so that they can actually make a lot of money now at $70 per barrel. So, okay, here's this is a minefield warning. I do not think that things with regard to our president are going to change. This is after a whole year, after he's had some success, and there is tremendous division. But the reaction to what he said about certain countries the other day, you know, I understand it. Nobody wants to have their country referred to like, and I don't like the crude language. It's not the way that I would say it. But I don't think he was commenting on all those people. I mean, immigration. I saw a presentation this week from a mainstream source of countries that have the highest percentage of immigrants in their population. Guess who's number one in the world? United States. It's like 1 out of 7 or 6 people in our country were not born here. Maybe 1 out of 5. It's an incredible number. And I don't think most people have a huge problem with it. But I'm tired of the social justice warriors running around saying, oh, if you want to control immigration, you're unloving, you're not a Christian. Baloney. Okay? Just baloney. I've showed you that gumball video a number of times. We can't take everybody in. And the best way would be to what? Improve the countries where everybody lives. I don't think the president is a racist. I have friends that are adamant that he is, everything from a racist to the most vile, evil man to ever walk the planet to the Antichrist. And if you don't believe that, they'll disfellowship from you. Now, look, I don't know how this all plays out. There's not a person alive right now who knows exactly who the Antichrist is. I kind of keep my eye on everybody on the world scene right now. I'm non-discriminatory in that fashion. Now, he also said, you know, these, and look at what's happened to our country. You see here that American exceptionalism. We are exceptional in this regard. This is from The Economist, a chart. And what they do is they compare, would you say news organizations are doing well at reporting the different positions on political issues fairly? So, and then they show the difference between people who support that and people who don't. And so, for example, Canada's up there. There's a 21% point difference. Germany 18, Ghana 9, India 9, United States minus 34. Because people don't, 34 points, 34 out of 100 people, or the difference is 34 more people don't believe the media does that in the United States as opposed to those who support what the media does. And we're the worst in the world, or the most exceptional, in that we realize that the media's got an agenda. So the president comes out and he says, you know, these countries aren't very good places. Why can't we get more people from Norway? Whenever he says, oh, he's racist because he thought of a Northern European white country. Do you understand that things happen in a context? I use a lot of examples here of things that have happened to me over the past few days or week. Why would he mention Norway? Because he had just had a meeting with the Prime Minister of Norway. And I think he liked her. And so when he thought of a country that's a good country, a good example, he thought of Norway. Because that was at the front of his mind. But does anybody ever look at the context of this? AI. This is from The Economist. I don't know if I used this last week or not. When thoughts control machines. That's kind of a frightening thought in and of itself. But this is where they're going. They want the mind to control everything. And then you see, of course, technology is perfect, right? Somebody hit the wrong button and Hawaii was in a major panic. You know? Probably worse than if they'd run out of those nice little, in case anybody from Hawaii wants to, you know, send a gift in. You can, you know, those little Mauna Loa toffee-covered macadamia nuts. You can buy them at the ABC stores, those little cans. Just send a case if you're shipping them that far. So I'll give them to a good cause. So, bigger panic than if they'd run out of Mauna Loa butter toffee macadamia nuts. And it turned out, well, we made a mistake. I just use as an example, this is a friend on Facebook, End of Days Countdown. He's got a blog. You can look at it. They have discussions about different prophetic prophecy issues. And what I'm finding as I study Facebook and I go through these is that nobody really agrees with anybody else on this. We all have our own thoughts on this, and I'm all for it. Look, I'm a lawyer. I'm all for my whole life, as I've said, is an argument. And so I don't mind arguing. We just need to keep the level at a pretty good level and stop with the throwing around the things. Putin this week. I'm just going to roll through a bunch of things here that may or may not be connected. Putin now looks like he's going to win the election, especially since the candidate that was probably most likely to beat him has been disqualified. It's a really good way to ensure your reelection. Now, if I ask you a question, how many would like to take a look at this picture and say, that's a church? You can raise your hand. How many would say it's a warehouse? Nobody's going to say it's a warehouse. You're only doing it because you think you're thinking the wrong way. This week in China, this church, where about 25,000 people worshiped, was destroyed, as were a couple other large churches. And this has been happening in China. Global Times, a state newspaper in China, described the building's destruction as part of a citywide campaign to remove illegal buildings, and quoted an unidentified official as saying that the church had been secretly constructed without proper permits and was initially disguised as a warehouse. Which only goes to show you that they have incompetent people in charge in China too. How do you build that in secret? Seriously. Now, we can question the design, but China doesn't like it. They think it's a threat, and so they do it. But at the same time, China's big, and they're pushing this One Belt, One Road initiative to kind of unite the world with trade. The big issue, one of the big issues this week was the JCPOA, the agreement on Iran and its nuclear program. There was, of course, the president came out and eventually at the end of the week and said, we're going to allow it to go, but this is the last time I'm going to let it go forward. We need to think about more sanctions, adjusting the sanctions. Of course, the EU immediately came out. They had a meeting with Zarif, as you saw in that lower video there. And Federica Mogherini, the EU foreign policy chief, came out and said, this is a good deal. It's a good deal. We think it should be enforced. It's great. And they had a nice little kumbaya moment and dinner and reception there with Foreign Minister Zarif of Iran. And there's no sound on this video, so I don't think there is. No, it's not. So we know there's been these Iranian protests and that sort of thing, but if you notice, they've kind of died down over the last week. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, because I'm not there and it's hard to get a lot of good information out of there. What happened was that there were, through our State Department and other foreign governments, they were able to get information to people in Iran about how to get around the shutting down of Iran's servers and that type of thing to allow them to continue to communicate on a platform that was similar to Instagram or Twitter. I think it's called Telegram. And so some of the protests continued, but some of those have been shut down now. There's, a couple dozen people or so have been killed. We don't know what's going on. What you need to know is that the money that went from the United States, it was over $150 billion. People in Iran saw that we're getting $150 billion. And so what did they expect? We're going to get 150, we'll get some of that. That'll trickle down to us. But Iran is very corrupt. There's a front page article in the Wall Street Journal, and there are articles elsewhere, that part of what's driving this is that there's tremendous corruption in the Iranian government. It's not all the Persian people who are bad. It's the government. The president might have a word to describe what he thinks of the government. I won't use it here. You know what that word is by now. But what happened there is it's corrupt. The government is corrupt. Just like a friend of mine from Africa wrote and said, 44 out of 54 countries in this continent are corrupt. And maybe the president understated his description of them. That's why people want to leave. And it's just a fact. It doesn't mean I hate the people in Africa. It's just that we have to be able to discuss these things. And so the Iranian government is horribly corrupt. What was happening is they went to people, and what they did was they would have a bank, and the bank would make people, they would say, we're going to pay you 25% interest. So people say, hey, that's good deal. So they would put their life savings in these banks. The banks would loan the money out to usually government-connected businesses, contractors, that type of thing, greasing the skids. And then what would happen? The bank would declare bankruptcy. Well, what had they just done? They've robbed the money from the poor people who put their life savings in there, their retirement and everything. I saw interviews with these people. And they gave it to their friends. And I told you last week, Khomeini, the Ayatollah, the religious guy, controls a fortune of somewhere around $100 billion. In terms of money that he controls, there may only be one or two people on the planet that have more control over a vast sum of money individually than that man. It's corrupt. And the people are seeing this, and they're setting up these banks. Banks are going out of business, and the people they're tired of it. And so this is why I said when we look at these things prophetically, if this is the time, what's going on there, and I think there's a lot of undercurrent of unrest in Iran, but countries try to start wars to refocus the people's attention to somewhere else. And the Bible says in the end times that this country and a couple others, and a number of others, are going to come together and they're going to attack Israel. Now, there are some other things that are going on in this regard. This happened just around Christmas, that Erdogan went to Sudan, and this is Bashir, who's wanted. He's a wanted criminal, but he flies all over the Middle East. So Erdogan went down there and met with him. They signed a bunch of agreements. One of them was to give Turkey pretty much control of a point. If you can see, let's see here, if I can get my little laser pointer going. There we go. Okay. If you see here is Jeddah on the east coast of the Red Sea. This Red Sea here is roughly 100 miles across. Inland, by the way, in Jeddah, they're building the tallest planet on the tallest building on the planet. It'll be probably 600 or more feet taller than that Burj Al Dubai in the UAE. So there's Jeddah, and over here is Mecca, and then up here a little ways is Medina, right here. And of course, these are the Muslim holy cities. But there's Port Said is right around here, and then south of here it begins with an S-A-I-K-A-N, I think it's called. And this was used in the Ottoman Empire as a transit point where the Ottoman Turks would send people there, and then they would take a boat across the Red Sea to Jeddah and then go to Mecca on their pilgrimage. And so Erdogan wants to be the new caliphate, the sultan, I guess, if you will, of the Middle East. He wants to restore the Ottoman Empire. So he's busy doing this. Now, why is this important? Well, we know that the alliance is described in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, and we've talked a lot about that. We've shown how there's this alliance. It's not a solid alliance. It's not rock solid. It will kind of go in and out. But we have this arrangement now between Iran, Persia, Russia, Turkey, all sort of in the north of the nation of Israel, which is exactly where they would say. But it also says that there are other countries that come with them, Cush and Put. And Cush is Sudan, and Put would be Libya. And we see, so here is one of those people in that alliance there, of the big three, now going down to Cush or Sudan to make an alliance. And they signed like 12 agreements. I'm just saying that it's all continues to come together. It may mean that the fuse is getting shorter for some of these things to happen. Or the conditions are ripe for a mudslide, if you will, a prophetic mudslide, where everything is going to happen and people are going to be swept down the road, whether they like it or not. Turkey's upset with the U.S. because we had a big trial here and someone was convicted that's close to the Erdogan government. So he says, we're not going to give you anybody that's you want to extradite from our country to stand trial in the U.S. And they want the Fethullah Gulen, who lives up there in the Poconos. They want to get him back. And so the relationship between the U.S. and Turkey is very tenuous. But at the same time, Turkey's a little bit upset with Russia. So there was this Syrian militants launched a counteroffensive in Idlib in the northern part of Israel, or I'm sorry, Syria. So you see here, this would be Tripoli, Beirut area right here. And so there's Tartus, that's the seaport right here. There's a base, Russian air base in here. And so up here in the northern part of Syria, in Idlib province, it's really under the control of Turkey, but there's been an offensive launched against the rebels that are there that are anti-Assad government, and Erdogan and Turkey is anti-Assad. So Erdogan wants to control that country. I've showed you maps of what he wants to do. And so there is this, there's an alliance, but it's not a really strong alliance. And what we know prophetically from Daniel chapter 2 is that this final empire that kind of comes together, and I think it's broader than just Europe. That's just my take on Bible prophecy. And I have friends who disagree with it. We'll see how it plays out. But what it says, though, is that this final empire is iron mixed with clay. It doesn't really adhere together. And so what I'm saying is that even when you see this Muslim alliance come together, it's iron and clay. It doesn't mix. It's not strong, but there's still an alliance. All I'm telling you is that these are the conditions that the prophets said would exist in the end times. These people would be aligned together, but it would be, any of these alliances are going to be sort of like iron mixed with clay. It just doesn't adhere together. Caroline Glick has a good article. I think this was Tuesday in the Jerusalem Post. The Palestinians race to the bottom. And how bad could it be? And I don't think she's a prophet, but she sort of spoke prophetically in this, because what happened virtually the next day, that day, it was published on Tuesday, and this is the Wednesday Jerusalem Post, and a rabbi driving up in Samaria near the turnoff on Route 60, which is the major road up through there. Pam and I were on it just in May. And we took the turnoff over to Nablus, and this rabbi was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting. The response of the Israeli government has been, we're going to recognize this unrecognized, we're going to make this settlement official. It hasn't been to this point. And so they had a big funeral the next day. Naftali Bennett went as a representative of the government, and he tried to speak, but he was essentially shouted down by cries for revenge from the crowd. And things are very tense up there. They were tense up there when we were up there, and so the IDF has been going through Samaria, Nablus, trying to find the person or persons who killed this rabbi. He was 35. He had 6 children. And so now the question becomes, and the president has tried to deal with this issue, the Palestinian Authority takes money that they get from other governments, and it goes to line the pockets of the leaders of the country, of the Palestinian Authority, and you can drive around up there, and you will see big mansions all over the place. When you go to the Tel at Biblical Eye, there's a neighborhood there that looks like something out of the better parts of like Orange County, California, or Beverly Hills even. Big homes. A whole big neighborhood of them. But if you're a terrorist and you get these payments, and there's a chart in the Jerusalem Post this week of the payments and how much you get. You know, if you get 3 to 5 years in prison, you'll get 2,000 shekels a month of your family. If you get 20 to 35 years in prison, you'll get 10,000 shekels. Your family will get 10,000 shekels. And it goes up the worse your terror act is. This was in the Daily Sabah. By the way, on the way over here today, I wasn't sure what Sabah meant. So I thought, I'd never asked Siri a question, so I thought, I'm going to ask her a question. What does Sabah mean in Arabic? Now, Google is non-discriminatory, right? So what does Siri tell me, or Google, or Apple? I don't translate into Arabic yet. So who's the discriminator here? I mean, I don't know it, but neither does Siri. But the report that the Saudi Crown Prince went to the PLO, to Abbas, he conveyed to him the deal of the century. Here's what the article says. The Palestinian leadership has been informed of U.S. proposed deal of the century, ostensibly aimed at resolving the decades-long Israel-Palestine conflict via the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, a PLO official said Wednesday. Jared Kushner, U.S. President Donald Trump's advisor and son-in-law, has conveyed details of the proposed deal to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. A member of the PLO Executive Committee said. The term the deal of the century refers to a back-channel U.S. plan to decisively settle the perennial Palestinian-Israeli dispute. Details of the ambitious plan, which would reportedly involve several states in the region, however, remain ambiguous. According to this PLO spokesman, the plan is largely based on some kind of Arab-Israeli alliance against Shia Iran. Same time, a Swiss report comes out, says that Saudi Arabia is going to wants to buy Iron Dome system from Israel. This is in the Middle East Monitor, the Middle East Monitor. Palestinians seek full UN membership. Another report here was that Israel had thwarted attack involving planes in Europe. This was in the Jerusalem Post the other day. In Europe, to show that they're not getting it, Vienna police charged 3 men for waving Israeli flag at rally. Europe is gone. Berlin has had to come out, this is from Financial Times, to defend the hate speech law. And I heard an interview with the guy who was charged. I remember he got a 6-month sentence, 3 years probation, because he posted a picture on social media, I think it was on Facebook in Germany, of the Hajj Aman al-Husseini meeting with Adolf Hitler. It was a historically accurate photograph. And he was charged. And he got a left-wing judge. Don't tell me that judges aren't important. And the Bible says in the end, you'll be brought before what? Magistrates, judges. That's who you should be afraid of or concerned about. And he was Now he appealed it. He got a conservative judge, and they threw out. I think they threw it out, but it might get appealed again. Their system over there does this. Up there in this is from Gatestone Institute about the problems with the prime minister up there and his acceptance back of people from the Islamic State. And he just thinks we should just bring them back, and we'll educate them. I'm not encouraged by that. This happened a few before the last update that I did, but the reports just kind of came out this week. There was a Israeli attack on some targets near Damascus. That sounds very much like some things that we think are going to happen in Bible prophecy, Isaiah chapter 17. This time it was airplanes. I think the planes made a couple of sorties, 2 or 3 sorties, and they also shot missiles. And they're trying to keep the Hezbollah and the people there, they're trying to keep Iran from building advanced technology missile factory, essentially. This has led to the Security Cabinet in Israel to look at what do we do about this northern border situation, because now essentially we have problems on the Golan to the east, Golan to the northeast, and Lebanon and Syria to the north. And it's a problem. The IDF came out this week in Haaretz and said that the flare-up could easily lead to war. Now, they didn't think that was going to happen, but there was going to be these things that happen all the time. And the Golan area, here, I think this is well, here's what this article said in, I'm not sure where, I think this was then, it was in one of the Israeli newspapers. The main problem with the Syrian front is the establishment of a crowded system of precision-guided rockets and surface-to-surface missiles, which will begin in Lebanon, stretch all the way to the southern Golan Heights, and cover the entire Israeli territory with precision-guided warheads. This scenario will present a security challenge which Israel has never experienced before. At the same time, the Iranians are building a missile front in Gaza, which will require the IDF to divide its efforts in fighting high-trajectory weapons between the north and the south. So far, Israel has failed in neutralizing the missile and rocket array that has been deployed in Lebanon for years. The battle it is waging, according to foreign reports, is aimed at preventing the Lebanese arsenal from turning into an arsenal of precision-guided missiles. In Syria, on the other hand, the Iranians are likely just beginning the process of building a similar and more crowded missile arsenal based on an existing local industry and on the land bridge from Iran to Syria through Iraq. To complete this arsenal, they need time and money. If the Russians and Americans are incapable or unwilling of doing it through diplomacy, Israel has apparently no choice but to do it on its own. We can no longer hide behind the vague statements and hints. This is a war for all intents and purposes. The enemy must know this, and more importantly, the Israeli public must internalize and prepare. And so you have this situation. You have the Golan Heights here. Here's the Sea of Galilee. The Golan Heights. ISIS does control this area down here to the south. I think it's actually right down in this area, sort of southwest of the city of Damascus. It was Arid Shiva is where I saw this. The recent Air Force strike, according to Syrians, was carried out in a military complex near Al-Katifa, where Syrian Scud brigades were stationed in the past, and which likely houses rockets, missiles, production factories, and storehouses intended for Syria and Lebanon. It's a problem, and Israel's going to have to deal with it. This is the article from which I took that. This article at the Begin Sadat Center about securing a Jewish future in the West Bank following Trump's Jerusalem declaration. Good article, you should go look it up, by Rafael Castro. Here from Ynet, another article about the Iranian wall of fire that's taking place and Hezbollah and what's going on, and something needs to be done. This report says the covert battle waged by Israel against Iran on Syrian soil, according to foreign reports, is coming out of the fog. It no longer matters whether Israel claims responsibility for strikes in Syria like the one reported by the Syrian army on Tuesday or doesn't. They have to do something. Now, this is interesting. Gal Gadot, she played in Wonder Woman. She's an Israeli actress, and she wore a dress that had been designed by the famous Lebanese designer. And he posted a picture of it on Instagram. And he had to take it down because you brag about dressing an Israeli, a Jew? How dare you? I mean, so it shows that this is very much embedded in people. This report this morning, I think this was front page of Haaretz. Palestinian president may announce alternative to two-state solution on Sunday. So what we'll see what happens. At the meantime, one of the ministers in Israel, Isaac Herzog, called for a Saudi role at the Aqsa Mosque. Well, who's upset about that? Who controls the Aqsa Mosque right now, the Temple Mount? The Jordanian government, through the Waqf, the religious authority. This is an article in the Financial Times about the Iran-Saudi battle through proxies. And so we see this even, when a minister of the Israeli government comes out and says, well, the Saudis should have a role at the Aqsa Mosque, they're playing into this proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And here are a couple reports. There's a report that there's a Sunni rift is occurring. You have Turkey, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Qatar, and they're all fighting with each other. And what's happening is Iran is taking advantage of that. And here's a report from Deb Kafile on ILTV. I'm going to play this one and another one, which is kind of something that I've only confirmed a couple places, but it's not heavily reported. But here's just a little report on what's going on from Deb Kafile.
Meanwhile, Iran has moved its military focus from Iraq to Israel's borders. As a result, Israel may find itself facing a decision to engage Iran and Hezbollah later this year as they draw closer to 3 of its borders. 5 factors will influence this decision. First, Iran has opened the Overland Bridge. Second, Israel and the U.S. will not allow Iranian Revolutionary Guards to set up a military-industrial complex in Syria, which Tehran plans to be its Middle East weaponry hub for supplying rockets to Hezbollah, the Syrian army, the Shiite militias, Hamas, and the Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip, along with other Iranian agents. Third, Jordan's security is put at risk with Iran's method of expansion. The rise of a pro-Iranian leader in Amman would threaten Israel and destabilize the region. Fourth, Al-Quds chief General Qasem Soleimani has been bringing pro-Iranian Iraqi Shiite militia leaders to Beirut for meetings with Hezbollah commanders. Last month, Akram Abbas al-Kabi, head of the Iraq Harakat Nujaba, met with Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut to discuss establishing militias in Iraq, after which the Golan Liberation Brigade was created to assist Syria in reclaiming the Golan from Israel. Last month, Debka exclusive reports revealed that Iraqi Shiites, Hezbollah, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps set up operational headquarters in Damascus for coordinating operations on the Syrian and Lebanese borders with Israel. Finally, last October, a top-ranking Hamas delegation traveled from Gaza to Tehran, headed by Deputy Leader Saleh Aruri, and decided that Iran and Hezbollah would fund, train, and arm Ezzedine al-Qassam, the military wing of the Palestinian Hamas.
And that's interesting. Did you catch where they had set up the headquarters for this coalition? Damascus. Now, you have Israeli cabinet, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and if you remember when I played you the part of the speech by the head of the Israeli Air Force at the Herzliya Security Conference back in July, I think it was, the head of the Israeli Air Force said, what took us 6 weeks to accomplish in the last Lebanon war, we will do in 48 hours. And the implication of what he said, it would be shocking. Now, a lot of this sounds very much like Ezekiel 38 to me and other wars. Look, there's going to be a perpetual state of war until the Messiah returns. But there was one other little news thing that occurred, and it shows the rift that's developing between Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Now, the Hashemite family that controls Jordan, King Abdullah and his father before him, King Hussein, they used to control the holy sites at Mecca and Medina. But when the Saudis took over most of the Arabian Peninsula, there was a big Sunni area that was sort of left down and formed the country of Yemen. And that's why you see the fighting there. It's a war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but it's fought through proxies in Yemen, the Shia and Sunni groups. The Hashemites were forced out, and they were given the kingdom of Transjordan, Jordan. And then this report, and I've seen this a couple places, but it was on the Debka File report, so I'm not going to vouch for its total credibility, but it was kind of interesting what's happened in Jordan. We know that in Saudi Arabia, they arrested all these princes and people, and they've been making these deals with them. The government's been getting a big stake in a lot of these companies, like the one at Talil, who owns like Four Seasons, and some of these other big corporations own a big stake in Fox. They've gotten part of his companies, and it's cost them, I've heard, as much as $5 billion to get out of jail card. They've now formed a board to govern the Bin Laden Group. That's the big construction company in Saudi Arabia, started by the father of Osama bin Laden. And whoever's running the Bin Laden construction group is still under detention and not cooperating, and so they're being so this is the way it operates, and then this was a report in Debka and some other newspapers recently.
The Debka File reports that Jordan's King Abdullah announced that he is the servant of the first Qibla and third Holy Mosque. The king had been criticizing Saudi King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed for abandoning Jerusalem after Trump's announcement that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. To emphasize his statement, King Abdullah handed out large pins, which highlighted his role, and every Jordanian official was seen wearing this pin on Sunday. The king has openly opposed Trump's Jerusalem policy, while Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman and United Arab Emirate ruler have asked him to stop criticizing the policy and suspend ties with Turkey and Qatar. King Abdullah expressed his reply by claiming his religious role is equal to the Saudi royals. This power struggle could create a larger confrontation with direct repercussions on Jerusalem. Prior to this, the king put 3 senior Jordanian princes who have maintained secret ties with the crown princes of Saudi Arabia and the UAE on house arrest. The 3 princes have not been seen since their reported house arrest.
Well, so what's the key takeaway from there? You got to listen for key words in there. A conflict over, it's going to be, flashpoint is Jerusalem. Does that fit? I'm going to close with this. I want you to read First Corinthians 15. Paul talks about the fact of Christ's resurrection. Now I make known to you, brethren, the gospel which I preach to you, which you also, in which you also stand, which you received, in which you also stand, by which you also are saved, if you hold fast the word which I preach to you, unless you believe in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins, that he was buried, and then he raised on the third day, all of this according to the Scriptures. Appeared to Cephas, to the 12, to more than 500. They appeared to James, the apostles, and last of all to me. I say this because of all the things I talked about today, this is the most important. Most of you know here, people online don't. My sister died yesterday morning. Her husband found her about 24 hours ago. She was 69 and seemingly pretty good health. Went to bed early Friday night because she didn't feel well, and she usually slept in kind of late since she's retired. And when she didn't show up, my brother-in-law went and found her that she had passed away. I'm sad, but I'm not without hope that I will see her again, because I know she believed this. Folks, I'm going to tell you, time is short. It is not a joke. Whether you believe this or not has eternal implications, and you dare not delay. I'm sure when Sally went to bed Friday night, she expected to get up and do something on Saturday. None of us know that. Any one of us could meet the Lord in the next moment or die. The only thing is this in 1 Corinthians 15. That's what you need to believe. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the gospel. Thank you for the hope that it gives. In Jesus' name, amen.